This session is all about building point maps in Power BI. It's the first of a series of sessions on geospatial data. Power BI works really well with geospatial data. First of all, there's a lot of really good data around, open data, finance, economic, social, health, and Power BI can bring that all together and make it a coherent whole with its data modeling capabilities and visualize it very nicely. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead and build our first map. These are the files that we need today. Again, the link is in the comments below. Click on that and you'll come to this OneDrive folder. Click on Creating Point Maps in Power BI and that will bring you to this folder. There's a couple of files that we need for now. One is the Power BI worked example file that you can look at afterwards. It's exactly the work that we do. The second is this thing called price paid sw12.csv, which I'll explain in a moment. But just to say, if you click on the readme and attributions file, you will see the original links for all the files in this folder and their attributions. That price paid sw12.csv file is an extract from a much larger public file that I've downloaded from the Land Registry website. The Land Registry records all property transactions in England and Wales and has been doing so since 1995. That's about 25 years ago. There's about 25 million sales in there, about 1 million a year. And we are just looking at sales in a small area. SW12, that's a small part of southwest London, 2 miles across and 2 miles from north to south as well. So instead of 25 million rows, we'll be dealing with about 18,000 rows. That's all the property transactions in London SW12 in the last 25 years. Let's load that data into Power BI and have a look at it. So I can click on Get Data, and our file is a CSV file, and it's our price paid SW12 file. And I'll open that. And I'll transform data to go straight into the query editor. And the other thing that I'll do, I can close that down a bit, but it says column profiling based on the top 1000 rows. I can click on this and say, actually, I know there's only about 18,000 rows in there. It won't take too long to do column profiling on the entire data set. So what we've got here is, if we click on this, we will see that we've got 18,685 transactions that were made in SW12 in the last 25 years. Let's have a look at the details of them. I'll click on our first transaction and I'll bring up this so that we can see a kind of record view of the first transaction. So this was a property bought for £289,950 at 33 Hazelbourne Road, London. SW12 9NU, that's the postcode, we'll come back to that, on the 31st of May 2005. There's also a column called property type, and that tells us if it's a flat, terrace, semi, detached or other. And finally we've got lots of address information from this column onwards. The postcode is common to a set of about 30 different houses, so here gives us actually the street number, the street name and so on. I've closed the Power BI query editor and it's loaded all the data into Power BI, and we can see the fields in the fields pane here. Notice one thing, that the date, it's given it a nice date hierarchy. We just had the date column in the data set, but Power BI has helpfully given us a year, quarter, month hierarchy, and that's going to be useful for us. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to modeling and I'm going to create a new measure. I always like to have a number of calculation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say number of sales, and I'm going to say that's going to be equal to, if I do count rows of my table, which is price paid. There we go. And that's a useful calculation, and I always like to start with that, because now what I can do is I can just click on that number of sales and it'll give me a bar chart. I'll just move that over there, and we can see that there's 18,000 and odd sales in the last 25 years. While I'm here, I'll tidy up my column, I'll just say I would like it to be comma separated so I can read the number a bit better. Lovely. What I'll do now is I'll bring year onto the axis, and I'll just come along and I will put that in focus mode. And what we can see is this is the volume of sales over the last 25 years, and we can see there's been quite a change in the kind of 2000 to 2008. It averaged probably about over 900 sales a year. Then there was the financial crisis in 2008-2009. It dropped down to 379, climbed up again, and ever since 2013 it's gradually, the number of volume of sales has been going down, so it's now not even a half of what it was a decade or so ago. Let's build our first map. Imagine that we're interested in buying property in this area and we want to look at sales in 2019. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my Bing map visual here, click on that, and I will position it so that it takes up most of the page, and then I'm going to come along and click on postcode. I'm going to put postcode into my location field, and we get our first map. And what it shows us is the postcodes of all properties that have had a property sale in the last 25 years. Actually, we want to see the sales just in 2019, and we could do this by clicking on the bar chart on the particular year. That's our 2019 year, and that would show us our 2019 sales. Ditto, we could click on 2018 and that would show us our sales if we click on that 2018. But maybe a better way, since we want that as a permanent filter, is to click on the map visual itself, and then I'm going to drag year onto filters on this visual. And then it's a number, so it's advanced filtering, and I'm just going to say the year is, I'm going to say 2019, and I'm going to apply a filter. And now we've got our 2019 data. Let's improve our map. We might be interested in a particular type of property, a flat or a terraced house. So what we can do is we can take our property type and drag it onto the legend. We also might want some more information in the tooltip about exactly what the details of the property are. So what we can do is we can drag, for example, our street, our payon, which is basically our street number, our sayon, which is a secondary street number, and other things. So if you have a look at the tooltip now, we're looking at 15 Birkwood Close in this particular thing. We also might want to say we can size the bubbles by the number of sales. I'm going to put that on the size field. Or it might be more interesting for us, instead of the number of sales, I'm going to say actually I want to size it by the price. I want to size it by the price. I'll put the price there, and I'm also going to put the number of sales on the tooltip as well there. So if we have a look at a particular one, let's come over to this one here on Emmanuel Road, and we can see that it was a T-terraced house for over £1 million, 180 Emmanuel Road, and of course I should also add the date to that slicer as well, so to that tooltip as well. So I'll come along, I'll go take my date, I'll drag it down into my tooltips, and if we go back to that property, I think it was this one, we can see that it was on the 8th of November 2019 it was sold. One small improvement might be to go to map styles and change the theme. It's road by default, but you could choose grayscale, which may be better because then you can see the colours of the data points a lot more clearly without the distractions of the green for the park and the yellow for the main roads. Or you might try to do something like a light one is kind of reasonable compromise, where you can still see the kind of background features, but they don't interfere too much with the colours of our data points. I'll leave it like that. Our next improvement is to the legend. At the moment we've got the property codes in there, D for detached and so on. We'd really love to have the names. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the query editor and we're going to create a small table, lookup table. We're just going to click on enter data, and I'm going to type this in, and then I'm going to call it my property type lookup. And you can see this has two columns, one for the code and one for the name. I'm going to set this so that we don't actually see it in the field list, because what we're going to do is we're going to come along and we are going to merge it into the main property price dataset. So our second column is our price lookup. We're going to join these on the property type column and the property type code column. Here it tells us that it's matched all of them, which is great. I'm going to click on OK. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand that new column is a link to the new table. The only column that we want is a property type column with the full name in there. I'll click on that, and now we've got our property type column. I'll do close and apply, and that will take us back into the Power BI property. And now what we've got as well, we'll see it in a minute, as well as property type, we've got property space type, and that's got, if I replace that on the legend, you can see that now we've got the same thing, but now we've got the names on the legend, which is a lot better. One thing that we've glossed over so far is the fact that we put postcode into our location. Firstly, we haven't needed to add latitude and longitude here, and that's because postcode is Power BI is able to geolocate the postcode. So if we just give it UK postcodes, it understands enough about them to work out the latitude and longitude for each of those postcodes and deliver them to us. So we don't actually have to put latitude and longitude here. There are reasons why we might want to later on. Not all maps work in this way, for example, and it might be faster and quicker to have the latitude and the longitude so that Power BI doesn't have to go and retrieve those every time it produces the map. The other thing is that as postcodes have about 20 properties associated with them, what happens is we're grouping by postcode, so we get these little kind of pie charts. And so, for example, if we have a look at the pie chart here, that's made up of one detached house for a rather large amount of money. It's made up of one semi, and in the year as well there was one flat sold, all very expensive. We can look at the detail of those by simply clicking on here and going showing data point as a table. That will just show us all the details for that particular property sale. And as well, if we want to click on a one that has several property sales, we can do exactly the same, and that will show us that that point is made up of these 5 property sales and all the details about them. I mentioned that it's really useful to have the latitude and longitude available, but as we can see, the price paid dataset doesn't give us those. So let's go and rectify that. And that brings us to the second data file that we're going to use in this exercise. Again, it's in the course materials, and it's called postcode sw12.csv. And actually, that is a small excerpt from a file from the ONS. And that ONS has a file about 200 megabytes. It has 2 million postcodes, all the postcodes in the UK. What I've done is simply for speed is to extract only those 1,000 or so postcodes that are in the SW12 area, SW12 outcode. Let's load that data in and have a look at it. Again, it's another CSV file, and it's postcode SW12. I'll go straight into the query editor when it comes up. Great. And what we can see is we've got just under 1,000 postcodes in this area. They all begin at SW12. We're back in the query editor, and I'm just going to choose a very few columns at the moment, just the ones that we need right now. So I'll come and choose my columns. I'm going to choose the postcode in the format that our Land Registry data is in, and I'm going to choose my latitude and longitude, because I obviously need those. I'm going to choose my LSOA, I'll talk about that later on, and I'm going to choose a ward. A ward is a subdivision of a local authority. So now we're back in the model plane. I closed and applied from the query editor, and I brought that data in. We can see we've got this new postcode SW12 data set, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to join it up on postcode. So I'm going to drag my PCADS to my postcode, and now we're going to get a relationship that's one to many because one postcode has many property sales. The next thing I'm going to do is to hide the postcode column in here so we won't see it in the report view. That's because we've got postcode twice. We don't need it twice, it would just confuse our user. So if I come up and look, we can have a look at our price paid. We no longer see the postcode. And what I'm just going to do on this one is I'm going to take my PCDS, that's my postcode column there, and I'm going to replace postcode with it. We'll get exactly the same. If we look at our model and we look at our lat long, we can see what we might expect. Those are numerical values, so they have been come in with a little sigma sign because Power BI sums numerical values, but we can do a bit better than that. We can improve the model, click on the latitude and say, actually, we don't really want to sum latitudes, that doesn't make sense, so I'll say don't summarize. And we can also say that we can actually tell it that this one is a latitude column, and we can do exactly the same as the longitude column. So again, don't summarize. This one is a longitude column, takes a bit of time. And notice that it gives us the little globe icons next to each column, and that's useful, it tells us. Now let's produce a new map using the latitude and longitudes. I'll create a new page. I'll rename that page to Bing Lat Long. I'll bring on my Bing map and make it a bigger size. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my latitude and longitude. I don't actually want to average them, I want to not to summarize by them, so I'll just change those. And we get the first map. What we'll do is we'll put number of sales onto our size, and we'll also use property type on our legend. And the last thing that we'll do, as we did before, we'll come to our date and we'll just filter when the year, I'll use basic filtering this time, is 2019. There we go. And so we've got the same map as we had before. Let me just make it a bit more similar to the previous map. I'll put number of sales on the tooltip. I'll put price on the size. I'll put other address information on the tooltip, the street as well, and the pay on. And if we have a look at the tooltip, there we go. That's better. If the map is the same as the one before, what benefits has it got us? Well, first of all, it's probably a bit more performant, it's a bit more efficient because it's already got lat and long. Power BI does not need to go and get all the postcodes and the lat longs of 600 or so postcodes. Secondly, we've got this information as well as a lat and long, this thing called LSOA 11 and Ward, and that information is really useful areas. SW12, for example, was just a postal area, what the post office thought it was good for delivering letters about 100 years ago. But now we've got the ward, what we can do is we can come along and we can look at a kind of political boundary here. So I'm going to change that, put ward there, and we can see we've got several wards. We can now see quite clearly the different ward boundaries because each ward has a different colour. What we're going to do now is, if we have a look at the legend, we can see that it's got these kind of 9-character codes. These are kind of standard ward codes, and what we want to do is actually get the ward names. So let's go and do that. And again, I'm going to go and get another data set, which is I've downloaded from the ONS dataset, and this is a mapping between wards and local authorities. It also gives the ward names. Let's have a look at it. Just opening it up, and we'll just click on transform data. And here we see it in the query editor. What I'll also do as well is I will bring in all the rows so we can see how many rows there are. I'm going to call it, while we do that, I'm going to call it ward. That name was a bit long. And what I'm going to do is, what we've got is we've got the codes exactly as they match the codes in the Land Registry dataset. You can see that we've got nearly 9,000 wards in England and Wales. And if we look at the names, notice that the names are not distinct, so that's why we use the codes. There's 8,887 names, but only 8,246 distinct ones. And we've also got the mapping to the local authority codes, and we don't actually need that column, so I'm going to remove that column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say close and apply. That will bring the data into Power BI. the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to join it up in our model pane. Let's go to that once it's loaded. And what we can say is we're going to load our ward code, and that loads to the ward column there. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that ward column because I don't need it twice. And it's better to have the ward column in this table where all the other ward and local authority are. Now we're back in the report pane. We can see we've got this new ward table, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ward name and replace it with that old ward code, and you can see now that we get the proper names. For example, here's Thornton Ward. I can also replace it with the local authority name, and you can see that we've got two local authorities. What I'll do is I'll just make the colours a bit different. I'll make Wandsworth into a nice red, and we can see that we've got the boundary between the two local authorities here. This is really useful because it means that now if we wanted, our focus attention could be on an important kind of political area, a useful political area like the local authority. And what I can do, I've got all the local authorities here, but let me just search for Lambeth. I'll just click on that, I'll filter on Lambeth. So what we can do is now we can look at a particular local authority or a ward, a useful area. This doesn't show all the property sales in Lambeth in 2019 simply because Lambeth extends well beyond the SW12 postal area. We just brought in the SW12 simply for speed, but if we brought in the whole of London data, then we would have got the entire data set for Lambeth. One last improvement we can do. At the moment the map shows a point only where there happened to be a sale of property in 2019 and the size of the circle equal to the proportional to the price. What we'd really like is to have a circle of the same size on every postcode. So let's do that. What I've just done behind the scenes is I've just created a measure just as I've done before. This one here is called the number of postcodes, exactly like the number of sales, and it's on my postcodes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to replace price by number of postcodes, and we can see there are a lot more postcodes there, including all of those that didn't have a sale in 2019, and those postcodes show the extent of Lambeth within the SW12 area. In the next session we'll be looking all about shape maps, including the one you can see here, which is looking at social deprivation in a couple of wards in London. So I hope you will join us for that. Thank you.